Lila was held in a Texas mental hospital for saying she didn't want to be pregnant. What should she do? A couple of notes up front. Lila is a first-time mom, and this was a planned and wanted pregnancy. She is still trying to process the last 72 hours, which has caused her significant trauma and distress. She is writing this out publicly to warn other mothers. This happened in Texas. She is currently 9 weeks and 1 day pregnant. Lila has been in the ER a couple of times for severe 24/7 nausea, which is triggering significant panic attacks. The nausea is the worst at night and has been keeping her from sleeping, which makes her anxiety worse. Plus, she's unable to keep down food and liquids. It's been seriously horrible. Her first 2 ER doctors, women, were at separate ER locations, and both gave her hydration. One gave her Xerin plus sugar, but then she had issues with the Xerin backing her up. Lila had another bad night of vomiting and panic attacks, and she called her mom in the morning crying because she was so miserable. Her mom said she would go to a different ER with her, one that was a full hospital that had OBs on staff. When Lila got there, she explained the situation to a male ER doctor, who spoke with her for less than 5 minutes. She told him her issues with waking up with nausea, then panic attacks, then sleeping. She told him that the panic attacks, combined with everything, scared her and made her not want to be pregnant anymore. But she made it clear to him she just wanted relief and had no plan on hurting herself or anyone else. He refused to give her any medication, not even in 4-bag to help with fluids. He sent a social worker to talk to her about the panic attacks and said she could find a facility that would take Lila, who could help with medication, plus sleep, etc. Lila said okay because she was so desperate at that point and had been in the ER for hours with no help whatsoever. He never even called OB. Lila hasn't seen hers yet at all. She hasn't even had an ultrasound. Lila gets sent to the new clinic, and by the time she gets through processing, it's 3 a.m., and she's crying because she's having high anxiety, and she hasn't slept. They never gave her her nighttime medications or anything. She finally went to bed around 4 a.m., and then they woke her back up at 6 a.m. to do her vitals and said she needed to go itemize her belongings. Once Lila woke up, the nausea hit her immediately, and she asked for Xerin, which they refused because she had to see the internal medicine doctor first. Lila didn't get Xerin until 10:30 a.m., at which point she had missed breakfast and was nonstop vomiting, but the doctor would only allow one 4-milligram pill every 12 hours. She was so sick. Eventually, Lila is seen by a psychiatrist who she thought would be able to help her with meds, but he said no, she can't take anything because she's pregnant, and she'd have to talk to a different doctor who wasn't going to be in until Monday. This was on Saturday. At that point, Lila freaks out because now she's away from home. They aren't giving her her over-the-counter meds like Unisom plus B6 for nausea or her prenatals, and they're not giving her enough Xerin to keep the nausea at bay. Lila said she wanted to leave then, as she was there voluntarily, and the doctor was mad and said she'd have to sign an AMA form, and he'd place her on a 24-hour hold where the other doctor would talk to her before the 24 hours and determine if they'd try to get a court order to keep her. Lila was so shocked. She asked if there was any way she could talk to someone, as she didn't want to stay, and they were holding her involuntarily at that point. He said no. Lila's a panicky, sick mess after this and goes through all the paperwork they gave her, which included the patient bill of rights, which stated patients had the right to be discharged within 4 hours of request unless the doctor believed Lila was a danger to herself or others, or that she was mentally unable to make medical decisions for herself. Lila requested a written justification from the doctor outlining which of those reasons he was using to justify the 24-hour hold, and he refused. He just kept saying Lila wasn't allowed to leave until she spoke with the other doctor, who wasn't going to be there until the next day. At around 3:30, Lila's mom and Peter, her fiancé, came for visitation, and Lila brought her paperwork with her and showed them the patient rights documents, and they were angry. So, they stayed 2.5 hours after visitation and argued with them to release Lila, so she could go home since they weren't even treating her anyway and were withholding medications. The doctor refused to talk to Lila's family, even though she specifically included them on her medical release forms, so they had a right to request that information and were requesting a justification for keeping her there past the 4 hours. It got so bad Lila's mom even called the cops and filed a police report. They refused to let Lila go, so she had to stay another night without Zofran and couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't keep food or water down. There was no doctor on staff at the time, so when the nurses called to get Lila's Zofran prescription increased, the doctor didn't answer, and they couldn't do anything for her. Lila could tell the nurses were trying their best and were very frustrated for her. The original doctor came back an hour before the 24 hours were up and clearly did not want to talk to Lila. Lila thinks the other doctor said he wasn't getting involved because it was turning into a legal situation at that point. He was super short with her, and when Lila requested justification for the 24-hour hold, he said the ER doctor had said Lila didn't want to be pregnant anymore and used that as justification. Lila's absolutely floored at this point. He didn't want to speak further about the issue and discharged her, but apparently, no one knew how to discharge her because it's the weekend, so it took another few hours to even leave. The whole situation was so miserable, and Lila legitimately feels traumatized by the experience. She still feels like she needs help with the nausea and panic attacks, but she's scared to go back to the ER now. It's been so horrible, and Lila doesn't know what to do besides talk to her OB at her upcoming appointment and hope she's more understanding of her problems. Lila's going to file complaints with the hospital and the state regarding what happened. She is also going to consult with a few lawyers to see if she has a case against them. This whole experience has left her feeling incredibly hopeless and frustrated with the medical system. She feels like she was punished for saying she didn't want to be pregnant anymore. As for Lila, she is currently staying with her mom. She was able to finally get some rest and take enough Xerin and Unisom plus B6 to keep the vomiting at bay for a bit. She's trying her best to keep her cool and avoid a panic attack. Lila appreciates any advice anyone could give on how to navigate this situation. Comments by Lila. She really wanted to move out of Texas before she got pregnant because she was so worried for those exact reasons. Doctors are too afraid to treat pregnant women there, and it's safer for them to do nothing, even if it's more detrimental to the mother and baby, than prescribe something and be held legally liable if something were to happen. It's a horrible, horrible byproduct of the current abortion ban. It's really hard to convey just how traumatizing it was with only words. Lila was taken away from her supportive fiancé and family to be basically held prisoner and denied medication while she couldn't stop vomiting. She was around strangers, had paper-thin scrubs, and a small blanket. The vomiting caused her throat to burn, and she pulled a muscle in her neck, so it was hard to even move her head. Lila just cannot overstate how much worse this situation has become and the amount of physical and emotional damage it's caused. She genuinely felt so bad for the other patients there who clearly needed help. The doctor was so obviously uninterested and uncaring. It's hard for Lila to see how anyone there is getting the appropriate care level they need or how being there would make anyone less suicidal. It seems like the hospital is there to fill beds and extract as much money out of insurance as possible while running a skeleton crew of workers who provide the minimum legal requirement of care. Lila will say the nurses there were great, but the facility and doctors themselves were an actual nightmare. Thank you. Her mom is actually a retired police officer and works in records at a neighboring police department there, and she told them the same thing. They became very quiet, and Lila realized the situation was turning into a legal one and stopped really communicating with her or her family beyond what was absolutely required. Lila does agree fully. She is going to see what her OB does and says at her appointment tomorrow, then go from there. She is scared and nervous. It's hard at the moment because she also feels too weak to even advocate for herself properly. Lila's too exhausted to fight at the moment, so she is hoping her support system will help her get through this and be tough for her. She will eventually come forward with her story. She really wants to speak with a lawyer first and make sure all her ducks are in a row. Lila is also a semi-notable person in a niche field and is not public with her pregnancy and takes her privacy very seriously. One of the nurses at the hospital even recognized her, which was also horrible in its own way. She is sorry you also had to experience that. At one point, Lila was laying on the bathroom floor, wondering if she was going to die there. She was worried they were going to take her to court and force her to stay there longer without treatment and without her family. She's not sure how she will eventually recover from this, but she knows she has no other option than forward, and things will eventually get better. If her fiancé and she have to empty their life savings to get her to another state for appropriate care, then they will do everything they can. That's the thing. If they had been providing Lila with medications and monitoring her, she would actually understand and probably wouldn't have left, but they weren't providing her with any treatment. Lila was having active panic attacks, and she didn't even get a, "Hey, try these breathing exercises." They were just holding her hostage and denying her care. That's not true. There are plenty of medications that treat anxiety that are safe during pregnancy. Having constant panic attacks and not being able to keep down food or water is not safe for pregnancy or the baby either. You have to weigh the risks of each decision you make. Lila also suffers from ulcerative colitis, which is triggered by stress. She is off her UC medication because it's not safe during pregnancy. Lila almost lost her colon during her last flare, which lasted a year and a half, and she was on steroids for 7 months to help control the inflammation, which would absolutely not be safe for pregnancy. These conditions can quickly become life-threatening. Lila didn't request an ultrasound. She simply stated that she hadn't even had one yet. The reason she wanted to work with someone in OB was because it was clear the ER doctors were uncomfortable treating her because she was pregnant, and she thought an OB would be more knowledgeable in which medications are safest for pregnancy. Another reason Lila mentioned the ultrasound was because the reason for denying any medication was pregnancy. However, she wasn't even sure if the pregnancy was progressing correctly. It's her first pregnancy, and her mother has a history of missed miscarriages where the baby stops developing, but her body didn't start the physical process of expelling everything. Hopefully, that adds more context. Lila is not familiar with the medical system, and this is her first pregnancy, so she doesn't think it's unreasonable for her to think that maybe someone with more experience treating pregnant patients in a state with very tight restrictions would be a better fit for her at that moment. Lila personally thinks this is wildly unbelievable, but it happened to her. She has no prior history of psychiatric hospitalization. She takes buspirone and Zoloft. She developed a panic disorder after being on prednisone for 7 months due to her ulcerative colitis, which was well managed before pregnancy. The constant vomiting triggers her anxiety, leading to the panic attacks. To be clear, Lila was not involuntarily held. She went voluntarily because the social worker said they'd be able to help her with medication and sleep. The psych facility knew they had no reason to keep her, therefore, could not obtain a court order. If they believed Lila was actually a danger to herself or others, then they would have gone this route, but they didn't. Her nurse there said he believed Lila did not belong there. He even told her family that and fought to get her released. Lila understands you're making a judgment based on your experience and knowledge, but she hopes you could put yourself in her shoes as someone with very limited knowledge of the medical system and going through her first pregnancy. Their thought processes and reasoning are probably going to be vastly different. Lila did what she thought was the best thing to do in her situation, and it turned into a nightmare. She is sorry if her story isn't believable to you, but she's still going to do what she can to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again in the future. To be clear, the reason Lila went to different ERs was because the first one was a standalone private ER, like a CarePoint or something, and the ER doctor recommended going to one with an OB attached next time. So, the next time, Lila went to a Baylor ER hospital, which she mistakenly thought was a full hospital, but it was some type of hybrid situation. She is not originally from Texas, so she's not familiar with the hospitals around there. The next one Lila went to was an ER at a full hospital. To add more context, they had asked Lila if she had a history of panic attacks, and she explained that she did. She had developed a panic disorder after being on prednisone for 7 months due to her ulcerative colitis. They asked what she would do in those situations to avoid triggers, etc. Before, her panic attacks were focused mainly on social situations or being too far from a bathroom, etc. So, to avoid triggers, she'd do things like change her diet or avoid situations where there was no bathroom. But now her trigger was the pregnancy symptoms, which she can't avoid because she can't not be pregnant anymore. Lila said the panic attacks and nausea made her not want to be pregnant, which she believes was misconstrued, but she thinks there's some pretty crazy implications of saying any pregnant woman who says they don't want to be pregnant anymore can be held involuntarily at a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, Lila would have been more than happy to stay there, but because she wasn't really being given any further treatment, she just wanted to go home to her family and support system. If she was going to be vomiting, she'd prefer to do it in her own toilet. She was also worried about missing her appointment if they decided to hold her longer. The original ER doctor did not have enough to send her there involuntarily, and the psych at the facility openly admitted he believed the ER doctor misled Lila and was the one to tell her to fill out the AMA, but placed her on a 24-hour hold because it was their policy, which she had pointed out contradicted Texas state law for patients who were there voluntarily. This facility has been open for only 10 months or so, and one nurse said it's very rare that someone would come there voluntarily, but then request to leave so quickly. But Lila thinks a lot of those voluntary patients have been through that system before, so know what to expect, versus she had no clue. When Lila pointed out the 4-hour release requirement in the documents they gave her, they didn't even know that it was in there. They said all patients get a 24-hour hold, and they've never released someone within 4 hours. Lila meets with her OB tomorrow, so hopefully, she'll get some better support there. Thanks for listening. It's so scary. One girl at the facility Lila spoke to had been there 3 times for suicidal thoughts. She said she believed the facility wasn't supportive for patients who have disabilities or are pregnant. She said one time her roommate had dementia and was clearly not taking care of her hygiene or self at all, and the girl tried to advocate for the woman, but the woman received no help. The facility is new, open for only about 10 months, and Lila thinks they're trying to accept anyone to fill beds, even if they aren't properly equipped to care for them. She thinks a lot of these people don't have the wherewithal or the family support to advocate for them either, so nothing ever gets done and no one is held accountable. It's a nightmare situation and has been incredibly eye-opening. The social worker said that they were originally going to try to get Lila into one of the private rooms that they had at the hospital, but came back later and said the psychiatrist, Lila assumes, denied her. So she said she was going to call some other places and see if she could get her into one of them. Maybe 2 hours later, she came back and said she found a place who would accept Lila. This new place was indeed a locked facility. They have only been open for 10 months and seem to be accepting everyone. There were 2 other individuals who were admitted at the same time from the same hospital. One, Lila believes, was there for alcohol withdrawal, and the other expressed thoughts of suicide. The first ER doctor just seemed really busy and didn't want to deal with Lila. Then the psych at the facility was just the on-call doctor and clearly didn't want to be there and kept saying he couldn't release Lila until she spoke with the attending, who wasn't there because it was the weekend. Lila doesn't think they've ever had anyone challenge them on the 4-hour rule, as the place has only been open for 10 months. Lila was in a locked psychiatric hospital. No, you cannot just get up and walk out. Update. First, Lila would like to say thank you to the outpouring of support. It really means a lot to her. She's going to start with a very small update, and then at the end, she's going to answer some questions, clear up some misconceptions about what happened. Update. Lila did see her new OBGYN and had her first ultrasound. Her little guy is measuring right on time and has a heartbeat of 167. Lila feels overwhelmed with relief knowing he is safe there and doing well. She explained the whole situation to her OB, and she was incredibly understanding. She gave Lila a new prescription of Xerin and took some labs while Lila was there to check her electrolytes and probably some other things. Lila will have another follow-up with her soon. At this point, she feels comfortable enough working with her, so that's her current plan. As for complaints and legal stuff, there isn't much movement on that front due to the holiday, but Lila still has every intention to pursue those options and will try to update as much as she can. Now the other stuff, Lila did not expect that post to gain as much attention as it did. It was cross-posted many times, and the responses were overwhelmingly sympathetic, but there was a ton of skepticism, especially from doctors who read it. But hey, it's the internet, so that's to be expected, Lila guesses. At the end of the day, Lila doesn't need any strangers online to believe what happened to her, because she has recourse in real life, and that's ultimately what matters. Lila was accused of changing her story, but she thinks that was mainly from people who skimmed her post. So below, Lila's going to clear up something and provide some additional details, not because she has to, but because she thinks if there's going to be discourse about her experience, she wants it to start from a place of accuracy of timeline and events. Starting with, at no point was the court involved with the decision-making process. Lila went to the ER willingly. They made it seem like they were not equipped to help her situation and that the other facility would be able to help her with her sleeping and panic attacks. Lila was so run down by the time the social worker came to her room that she'd have agreed to go anywhere they said would provide her with relief. Lila went to the new facility voluntarily, of her own free will. There was number 72-hour hold. When Lila mentioned 72 hours in her last post, she meant that the whole situation, from going to the ER to leaving the new facility, took place over 72 hours. Once Lila got to the new facility and met with the doctors, she realized that she was not in the right place to get the care she personally needed. Lila was away from her support system, not being given the proper medication to control her vomiting. Her anxiety was significantly heightened, and she was not being given any additional treatment or resources. So to her, there was no point in her being at the facility, and it was indeed making her situation undoubtedly worse. After speaking with the on-call psychiatrist, he told Lila that he thought the ER doctor misled her and that she'd need to sign an AMA form, which would place her on a 24-hour hold. It was clear he did not want to be the one to discharge her and insisted Lila needed to speak with the attending. He mentioned the possibility of a court order, but said it was unlikely they'd get one for Lila's case. After that conversation, Lila went to review the paperwork they gave her during admission. She found the patient bill of rights, which stated that for voluntary patients, they had a right to be released within 4 hours of their request unless 1. She changed her mind and wanted to stay. 2. She was under the age of 16 and her guardian didn't want to release her. Or 3. If the doctor has reason to believe that she might meet the criteria for court-ordered services or emergency detention because 1. She's likely to cause serious harm to herself. 2. She's likely to cause serious harm to others. Or 3. Her condition will continue to deteriorate, and she is unable to make informed decisions as to whether or not to stay for treatment. After Lila read that, she brought the papers to the nurses and requested a justification from the psychiatrist for the 24-hour hold. Lila wanted to know which reasons he was using. The psychiatrist did not provide a reason or justification beyond the attending needed to evaluate her. That's it. To be clear, this is illegal. They had zero reason to keep Lila past the 4 hours. At no time had she indicated she was a threat to herself or others, not verbally or written on any of the questionnaires that she had filled out during admissions. The attending not working that day is not a legal justification to hold her. Their schedule does not supersede Lila's rights as a patient. Now, after the 24 hours was up, the original on-call doctor came back to discharge her. He was clearly agitated that the attending refused to come in to do the discharge, so Lila never at any point spoke with the attending who was originally assigned to her. The on-call doctor did not seek a court order to detain her. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes or less. When Lila asked again for the justification to keep her, he asked her if she said anything to the ER doctor about wanting to end her pregnancy, and Lila told him she just said she didn't want to be pregnant because she was so miserable. Lila then tried to ask if he believed that was enough justification for the hold, but he cut her off. It was clear he didn't want to engage in any further conversation. Lila's concern here was the implications of legally being allowed to involuntarily commit any woman who said she didn't want to be pregnant anymore, which seems insane to her, but she digresses. To answer questions about the facility, why didn't Lila just leave? Because this was a locked facility, Lila couldn't just get up and walk out of the door. How were they able to take Lila so fast? This facility has been open only for 10 months. They had beds and empty rooms available when Lila was there. Questions about Lila's ER visits. Lila had 3 separate visits, which took place over 4 weeks. The first ER she went to was a standalone clinic, not associated with a larger hospital. The doctor there said next time to go to an ER attached to a hospital with labor and delivery. So the next time she went to an ER, she went to an ER hospital that she mistakenly thought was a full hospital, but it was a hybrid, and they did not have labor and delivery. The third ER was attached to a full hospital. Lila was not doctor shopping. She's just not familiar with the hospital systems there. Regarding Lila's comments about ultrasounds and OBs, Lila never requested an ultrasound during any of her visits to the ER. She mentioned the ultrasound in the original post just to state she hadn't had one yet and hadn't been evaluated by an OB yet. Lila's mother has a history of missed miscarriages, so in her head, Lila thought it could be a possibility, and if she was being denied medication for being pregnant, she was just hoping she did have a viable pregnancy. But again, she didn't request an ultrasound. Concerns regarding DIY abortion. Lila is not and has never considered a DIY abortion. She is lucky enough to have all the resources she would need to fly anywhere in the world to get appropriate medical care if she had decided to go that route. Both her fiancé and she work high-paying remote tech jobs, and in the worst case, they could move out of state tomorrow if Lila absolutely needed to. Obviously, this isn't an ideal route, but it is an option that is still on the table, even if it's just to get care in a better medical system outside the state of Texas. Medications Lila's currently taking: 10 milligrams of buspirone twice a day, 50 milligrams of Zoloft, Unisom plus B6, prenatals, no benzos. So, to cut through all the BS, whether you agree or not with the doctor's course of actions, Lila hopes most people can see that the facility was not the right place for her to be. They were not well equipped to handle her pregnancy symptoms. They were clearly understaffed, and they were not providing her with any additional treatment that she wasn't getting at home. There was no reason for Lila to be there. It made things in her case significantly worse, and she hopes maybe, if anything, people can just learn from her experience. Again, Lila would like to thank everyone for their support and for the DMs she received. She's also so sorry for all the other similar stories she's read. It seems like there's a bigger issue happening here, and she hopes others can eventually find peace too. Lila is going to continue to work diligently with her OB, psychiatrist, and hopefully a therapist so she can really unpack this entire situation. As she said before, she'll try to update as much as she can, but she's sure the complaint and legal process will be slow-moving. Lila would also like to ask, if you know any attorneys in the DFW area who may be interested in this case, please feel free to shoot her a private DM with their information so she can follow up. She will also try to answer any additional questions in the comments in case there's anything else she's forgetting. Obligatory apology for the terrible formatting. She's on mobile. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.